My name is Susan Walden, and I'm here interviewing attorney Samuel Behrman about an area of the law that I believe few people are aware of. In Lawyer Talk, it is called third-party liability for criminal acts, or in a shortened version, inadequate security. Good morning, Mr. Behrman.
Good morning.
Can you describe what is actually meant by a claim based on inadequate security?
Yes, it's a claim against typically a business like a restaurant or a bar or maybe a condominium in which there has been a failure to protect the customers of that business because the business had a reason to know that there may be violence towards one of its customers and simply didn't do the things necessary to protect the customers. And so instead of this being a direct claim against the person who committed the violent act towards the customer, there can be a claim against the premises owner or the owner of the business where the violent act occurred, because the violent act may have been foreseeable and the owner of the premises simply didn't protect its customers by providing security or other things that it could do. So that's fine.
Is one example of that perhaps when an employee has been threatened before the act occurs?
That is an example of that. Or if there have been threats to customers, or if there have been a history of fights, for example, in a bar setting, or if it's a restaurant that stays open late at night and a lot of people congregate there and fights have broken out, or shootings have broken out, or knifings have broken out. In that situation, the owner of the business has got to be aware of the risk that could happen again, and has got to provide the security necessary to try to ensure it doesn't happen again, so that the customers can go there and use the premises, buy his merchandise in a safe manner.
And how did this law, or this area of the law, evolve?
It's an interesting question because it really started in the late 50s and early 60s when a very prominent singer was on the road traveling, and she was staying in a hotel. And the hotel, she was on the ground floor of the hotel. The hotel had a sliding glass door, and the sliding glass door had a defective lock. And one night, tragically, there was a rapist who approached the sliding glass door. It was not locked, was able to open the door and get in, and tragically raped this singer. And I say she was a singer because it became very well known, and that was really the origin of these types of cases, where she filed a lawsuit against the hotel owner for not providing safety to its customers. I mean, here was a hotel that was, among other things, being paid to provide some safety and security for the people staying there, and there was a defective door, a sliding glass door, that allowed a rapist to just walk right in and have access to the customer who was sleeping that night. So that was really the beginning of what's called third-party liability, meaning the hotel being held responsible to a degree for what happened to its customer.
Is there a reason why you think few people are aware of it?
Yes, I think when a criminal act occurs, which is commonly what we're talking about, the public thinks in terms of the perpetrator of the crime being responsible, and that's true. I mean, certainly the A1 perpetrator is the one who committed the crime, but there's an A2 perpetrator, and that is the business where the crime occurred. For example, if I mentioned earlier bars, if a bar has a history of fights among its customers, well, the bar owner has got to be mindful of that and has got to take precautions to make sure that doesn't happen in the future, and not just ignore it. And what precautions can be taken? Well, you can provide security guards, they have an inhibiting effect on customers beating up each other. And so the idea is that the customers there are entitled to a safe establishment to go to. And so the bar owner doesn't just sell his drinks and provide his music. He is responsible for providing safe premises. And if there's a history of unsafe goings on in that bar, then something needs to be done about it, such as providing security, which a lot of bars do. Again, the customer needs to know that when he goes there, he's not going to be assaulted by somebody.
You may have already covered this thoroughly, but can you give any other examples of how a business can be held responsible for a criminal act that occurs on its premises as a result of inadequate security?
Yes. I'm aware of an apartment complex in which there were adjoining apartments, and there was a woman living in her apartment, and the apartment next door had no separation from her apartment, and so somebody entered the apartment next door, went up into the attic, went over into her attic, and just came down into her apartment, and again committed a rape there. You can't have apartment complexes that are not secure from one another as well as being secure from the outside. That example of the singer that I mentioned to you, the example of fights going on at bars. A lot of restaurants now stay open late at night to get those who are looking for something to eat late at night. Typically, those are not middle-aged family members who are typically home in bed, but these are maybe teenagers or early 20s who may have more of a propensity for violence than those in their 30s and 40s who are home safe in bed. And so if you're going to have a business open and have a group of teenagers or those in the early 20s there, and particularly if you have a history of criminal activity going on there, whether it be drugs or assaults or fights or whatever it may be, you've got to do something to make sure that doesn't happen again. You've got to do something to make sure the customers are going to be safe. So there are a number of examples. Those are some of them.
Does this law include situations where perhaps inadequate security was given for property? Say a robbery happens, and even if no one is actually harmed physically, if property is lost as a result of inadequate security, is that included?
There can be a claim for that. These cases are not easy. You're trying to hold somebody other than the perpetrator of the crime responsible also, in addition to the perpetrator. And so they're not easy cases, and so one of the things you have to look at is what were the consequences of the action. In other words, if a fight breaks out at a bar that has a history of fights, but the person who was assaulted had a relatively minor injury, then it isn't worth the time, effort, financial commitment to put together and prosecute a lawsuit based on that. If property is stolen, for example, from a hotel, where there was a history of thefts at the hotel, a history of break-ins at the hotel, there may be a claim against the hotel for not better securing the rooms, but if the only property stolen was a $10 pair of socks, then it's not worth prosecuting a case based on that. But if you're talking about a substantial loss, I mean thousands of dollars lost in a hotel that didn't properly provide security for its customers, and this type of theft was foreseeable, then there is the prospect of a claim in those circumstances.
Now, are these cases typically settled, or do they tend to go to trial?
I think they may go to trial more than most other cases. All cases have a very high percentage of settling. These cases are not easy. Again, it's not like somebody ran a stop sign and hit somebody else and everybody acknowledges who's at fault. Trying to hold a third party responsible for a criminal act that was done by this perpetrator over here is not easy. And so they may go to trial more than other cases, but the vast majority settle. the vast majority of all cases settle.
So even after going to trial, there is still the opportunity to settle.
That's true. Or, again, even before trial, 90+% of all civil cases, not to be confused with criminal cases, 90+% of all civil cases end up settling. So these cases may not settle at a 90+% percentage, but they still have a high ratio of settling even before trial.
And discuss, if you would, how you go about handling a case like this.
When a case like this comes to our office, the first thing you have to look at is the seriousness of the loss, whether it's a serious injury or serious theft of property. Because, again, you've got to have that to justify going forward with the case. And if you do have that, then you want to learn, does the business establishment have a history of criminal activity? And you can find that out from the sheriff's department, from the police department, from law enforcement. You can find out if a bar, a restaurant, a condominium complex, a hotel, where you may have something going on in the parking lot because there was not security provided by the hotel. You've got to find out what the history of that business establishment is in terms of criminal activity. If they've never gotten a call before to if law enforcement's never responded to a call there because there's never been a criminal act going on there, then that's one thing. But if you look at the past 2 years and there have been numerous calls to law enforcement, then that certainly puts the owner on notice that he has a problem and he needs to provide for that concern. It's foreseeable that something could happen at that bar, at that restaurant, at that condominium, at that apartment complex, at that hotel, and you've got to provide accordingly. So that's the first thing you need to do. You also want to look in the neighborhood and see if the neighborhood has a history of criminal activity. You know, if you just open up a business and you're opening it up in an area that has terrible criminal activity, you can't just put your head in the sand and say, well, we've never had a problem here, so I don't need to do anything to provide for the safety of my customers here. We're going to be safe. Well, you may not be safe, because if the area around you has a high incidence of criminal activity, you need to be mindful of that, and you, again, need to provide for the security of your customers. That's all we're saying. Provide for the safety and security of your customers. They come to do business with you. You should not have a hole in the floor where they can step in. You should not have other dangerous circumstances like that. Don't have foreseeable dangerous circumstances such as the risk of a crime occurring there to one of your customers. Provide security, lighting, whatever needs to be done to provide for the security of your customers.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Behrman.
Thank you so much.